My name is Mark Friedlander. My wife, Andrea, and I are a mixed marriage. Andrea was raised in a very traditional, conservative kind of congregation. I, on the other hand, I had no religious background whatsoever. My father was one of those religion is the opiate of the masses kind of guys. My mother wasn't as militant about it, but she had no use for God or religion either. Instead, my sister and I didn't have to go to Sunday school or Hebrew school, but we had to submit to 1 hour, 1 day a month of her teaching us our Jewish background. And it always consisted of the same thing. She'd sit us down and ask us, who were the 3 most influential people of the 19th century? And we'd dutifully recite Sigmund Freud, Karl Marx, Albert Einstein. She'd tell us we were right, and she'd remind us that they were all Jews. And that was the extent of my Jewish education pretty much growing up. Very, very much the opposite of Andrea. We got married in late August, did a honeymoon, and came back in the middle of September, just before the high holidays. And that was the beginning of our odyssey to try to find something that we could both live with. She wanted to go to a traditional kind of congregation. She never thought about going to holidays in any other way other than what she had grown up with. I, on the other hand, was dreading it. So we were living in downtown Evanston, and we figured that what we would do would be to go to Northwestern's Hillel for the high holidays. Now, she'd always gone to 2 days for the high holidays, and I'd never gone to any. So we decided we'd compromise like a good newlywed couple, and we decided we'd go to 1 day of Rosh Hashana. And I didn't like it at all, but I didn't get nauseous during the services. And she didn't love it, but it satisfied her. And I thought, phew, we're done. And that's all I have to do now until Yom Kippur. But the next morning, Andrea woke up in a cold sweat. She had never before skipped a second day of Rosh Hashana. So like a good newlywed husband, I gave in on our compromise and we went back to the Hillel for a second day of Rosh Hashana, which I disliked even more than the first, and she didn't like even as much as the first day. So we explored several different congregations, or services rather. We went to a guitar service at the Marriott downtown. We tried a Reconstructionist and a Reform, and I even sat once through a conservative service, all of which I hated, and she really didn't like either. By that time, I was working in a law firm, and one of the colleagues in my law firm had a son who was being bar mitzvahed at a place called Beth Or out in Deerfield. Beth Or was the predecessor congregation to Kol Hadash. We went and sat through the service and had an epiphany there, or at least I did. There was no mention of God. There was no prayer with words that I didn't believe in. I loved it, so I figured that Andrea probably hated it for the same reason, that it was so non-traditional. But I was surprised. When we talked about it afterwards, she kind of liked it too. I was thrilled. We joined right away. We've been members of Beth Or, and after that, Kol Hadash, ever since then. So it really was the solution to our mixed Jewish marriage, and we're very glad that we found it. And we've found that more than just satisfying us religiously or philosophically, which is the reason we joined, that it's become a community for us as well. We have a rabbi who is brilliant, who is articulate and a fun speaker. I think of him like a graduate professor of philosophy, a pleasure to listen to, even in my atheistic kind of way. But more than that, the congregation has gelled initially around the founding families, but it's been very inclusive, and there have been dozens of other families who have joined since then who have found the same sense of community and social elements. We do a lot of the congregation's social events. We go to many of the Friday night services, not because we have to or we think it's important, but because we like seeing the people who are there. In fact, the rabbi kids, ours is the only congregation he knows where people hang around after the service for longer than the service takes. And that's really because we all like each other that way. So we made some of our best friends through the congregation.